Well, thank you all, and thank you for being brief. You actually gave me 1 extra minute, which I appreciate. I'm told that I have only 10 minutes to give my 3-hour talk, and so I guess I'd better get going. But the 3-hour talk's already been given by Andy anyway, so I mean, you know everything you need to know about Harry. We have 10 minutes now to celebrate. We're going to celebrate Harry Guess. We're going to celebrate the fact that we've been at this for 10 years, and we're going to celebrate that legacies that are established in pharmacoepidemiology by you can in fact live on and will, as long as there is a UNC. So thank you all for coming. It's wonderful to see you, and of course it's wonderful to be invited to celebrate Harry Guess. My first job is to point out that people have a life before pharmacoepidemiology. Some of us have longer lives before pharmacoepidemiology than others, right, Dr. Andrews? And this one for Harry was an extraordinary career. Before he ever became a pharmacoepidemiologist, he actually got his doctorate. Is that working? Let's see here. Well, it doesn't matter. He got his doctorate in mathematics in 1972 at Stanford. At the same time, he got his second master's degree. He got a first one at Georgia Institute of Technology. He was a whiz kid with the Department of the Navy in nuclear submarine technology and navigation. He worked at Bell Labs doing statistical models for communication. He was an NIH population geneticist and biostatistician before he went to medical school in Miami in '79 and then finally saw the light and came to North Carolina in '82 for his training in pediatrics. He therefore had a full career and then became a pediatrician, only he always knew that he didn't just want to be a pediatrician. This is what Harry looked like before pharmacoepidemiology. Whoops, I better get going here. So Harry and I crossed over. I'd actually had a 15-year career in government public health as well, and we crossed over to the dark side and went to work for the pharmaceutical industry. Can you imagine people with that kind of a background choosing work in big pharma? If you have never worked in big pharma, you may not be able to imagine that, but for those who have, you know that it is exhilarating. It's the first place I ever worked where I didn't have venal politicians telling me to do the wrong thing wrong and not confess to it. I mean, at Wellcome and at Merck, we were hired to do the right thing right. One of Harry's favorite turns of phrase, one of mine as well. I was at Burroughs Wellcome from '81 to '96 and then came over to UNC. Harry, I tried to recruit Harry, actually, Elizabeth. I think you remember that. Elizabeth came to work with us at Burroughs Wellcome in '83, and I tried like heck to recruit Harry to be a partner. He turned us down and went to Merck, which was, of course, one of the best things that ever could happen to us because, like us, he was a consummate public health professional. He knew that in areas of public health, pharmacoepidemiology, the competitive areas of the pharmaceutical industry have no place. Our job was to pursue the truth wherever it took us and be sure that our efforts were safeguarded so that when we found it, we could talk about it publicly and openly. Harry's sacred ethic and mine too. I actually discovered him on my way to give a lecture at UNC. He was rehearsing a lecture that he was going to give at Roche. One of his favorite slides he showed me, and I stole it, of course, which had Harry's anxiety level, the price of peanut butter, and the title of the slide was Coincidence or What? We became fast friends and remained that way until I lost that friend. And one of the best things in our collaboration was the annual Harry and Hugh show. I don't think any alumni of that show, you came to the Harry and Hugh show. There were over 100 people who did over 5 years. 5 years, 20 students for the first couple of years over at the wonderful Europa Hotel and then at the Sienna. The food was unbelievable, and so was the science, and so was the camaraderie, because this was a group of people coming from various areas of work before, including, of course, having worked in a more competitive side of the pharmaceutical industry and suddenly discovering the glory of being a public health worker inside the private sector, which was our fundamental message. Harry, of course, used to introduce, I gave the first talk, but Harry introduced the course, and then he said, now you're about to hear a very boring 1-hour lecture on pharmacovigilance. You will call it epidemiologic intelligence. That is an oxymoron. That would be Harry. But we collaborated, and then I had the chance to get back at him because I wrote down every funny thing he said, and at the end of 2 weeks, he got it right back the way he gave it. Thanks, Andy, for mentioning the wonderful hospitality of the Guesses. They actually discovered their North Carolina-ness at those sessions and began having annual pig pickings at their house. Harry, of course, was the inveterate pig picker. You can just imagine Harry over a carcass. And then finally, of course, I had the chance to do for Harry what I'm doing for you, Susanna. That is to say, my job is to just fill 10 minutes before the real stuff begins, all right? So it's called the run-up to a rock star. Welcome to our presence, Susanna. Harry was one of those rock stars, too. Then he saw the light and retired from Merck. But of course, he had a sweetheart deal at Merck, as you heard. He came down every weekend. Jerry stayed here. They used to go down to South Carolina when they could and get down to the beach. But he would be here on Monday and have open house and, of course, be a partner and friend to me and a soulmate, because often each of us came across insoluble problems in our pharmaceutical industry work. None of them scientific. They were all political. But we certainly worked together to help to figure them out. And together, I think we did okay. Harry became professor of epidemiology and statistics and pediatrics, of course. He founded the UNC Center of Excellence, UNC Center of Excellence, as you heard, for pharmacoepidemiology, thanks to some big cash from GSK, thanks to GSK for its wisdom, and Merck, which continued to support the center. And of course, he became the PI of the PROMISE program here at Chapel Hill. But for me, the favorite role was as the PI of the Center for Education and Research on Therapeutics, the CERT. He actually put UNC on the National Therapeutics Map for pediatric therapeutics. And much of what you saw yesterday, those of you who had the great pleasure of being at that remarkable symposium, all-day symposium, recognize that that was part of this extraordinary Harry Guest legacy. How many of you were there yesterday? Okay, so you saw Cindy's great slides. Here they are, shown very briefly because you saw them. Those of you didn't are going to have to be fast readers because I don't have a lot of time to go over these. But basically, Cindy captured some of the Harryisms that I used to capture every year at the Harry and Hugh show. I actually had a slide on this subject, and I took it out because yours was better. So thank you for sharing yours with me. I loved yours. Like, does it pass the New York Times test? It was a Harry Guest favorite comment. You may recall that, wasn't Vioxx a Merck drug? I keep forgetting. There's Harry pondering such things, of course. What really makes the most sense is not always the path forward. There's Harry Guest saying, "What?" And here is my favorite Harry Guest picture of all. Harry used to come to the Harry and Hugh show and everything else I ever saw with a Diet Coke in hand for breakfast. Cindy also reminisced that Harry was a wonderful mentor, and he was a mentor to me, as I was to him. We both were our nurturing souls and decided that each of us needed a lot of that in our roles and gave it to each other, as he did to those of you who were his students. Let me see how many of you were students of Harry's. Would you just raise your hand? Look around, folks, because during the reception, you need to be sure that you talk to one of those students and learn just how remarkable it was to learn at the hand of Harry and feel that you were the one who was bringing him the answers. And of course, he was a wonderful spouse and parent. Look at that, and grandparent. Oh, I'm sorry. One of Harry's favorite sayings was, "Time goes in one direction only," which is a reasonable axiom for epidemiology. But alas, it's also a reasonable axiom for living. And in 2002, I was making the rounds, as I did regularly in epidemiology, and walked into Harry's office and said, "Close the door, Hugh." And he told me of his diagnosis of aggressive lung cancer. We cried, and then he said, "But don't worry about it, I know what to do. I know I'm going to die, so I'm going to go get into a clinical trial, and when your turn comes, Hugh, here's what I would recommend you think about." So he decided to go into a clinical trial, which was rigorous, randomized, blinded, controlled. Here's an epidemiologist, rigorous, randomized, blinded, controlled, and was going to provide vital answers even if the trial ended up a failure. Thank you, Harry. That's what I plan to do, too, if my time ever comes under those circumstances. And iSpy, you know that he was a charter member of iSpy, a wonderful presence in iSpy. Thanks for the reminiscence about his passion for data privacy yesterday, Elizabeth. Absolutely. It just drove him nuts that people would have this extraordinary data set and then not use it because somebody was nervous that they might be able to figure out that that person who lived in Tuskegee was a so-and-so and maybe a so-and-so, and it could have been that person or that. To hear Harry on the subject of data privacy is to understand the history of pharmacoepidemiology. iSpy had the wisdom to create a special award for him, and in his last year, He was invited down to Nashville to receive the first ever iSpy Distinguished Scholar Award. And we at CERTS decided to have our CERTS meeting there too. I was chair of the National Steering Committee of CERTS, so I could pretty well decide where I wanted to go. And although Opryland would have been my last choice, Opryland with iSpy there was my first choice. And so we went. And Harry, dying of lung cancer, gave the most extraordinary 2-hour symposium for the CERTS to teach the Agency for Healthcare Research and Quality why observational methods were essential for understanding patient-related outcomes and effectiveness research. He was, in my view, the progenitor of the Effectiveness Research Symposium that we saw yesterday. Without Harry and his selling of that vision to AHRQ and therefore to Congress, we'd never be here. But of course, we also are in Opryland. So there is Minnie Pearl giving Harry a little smooch. And you can see that even in his last days, he was loving life and he lived large. Here he is giving his acceptance speech at iSpy that memorable day. Here he is with me in a moment I'll never forget right after the speech. Among other things, I'd never seen him wear a tie. So that told you just how important that speech was. I wore my hang in there tie. That's Winnie the Pooh hanging onto a balloon. It seems to me it was a message for Harry, and I wore it every time I saw him. And I'm wearing it today, so see it during the reception. And then on January 1st, 2003, that brilliant light burned out. But the legacy didn't. The legacy is here. The legacy is you. The legacy is going forward. The legacy is yesterday. The legacy is not going away. Nor is the memory of Harry without a tie and without unbelievable smile. And with that, I leave you with a celebration of Harry Guess.
Okay, well, that's quite a bit to follow. Hi, my name is Jessica Young, and I'm a third-year doctoral student in the Department of Epidemiology and this year's president of the UNC student chapter of iSpy. And on the behalf of the UNC student chapter of iSpy, the Center for Pharmacoepidemiology, and the Department of Epidemiology at UNC Chapel Hill, we welcome you to the 10th Annual Harry Guess Memorial Lecture. Before I introduce our speaker, I would like to recognize the other members of the UNC iSpy student chapter that have been instrumental in the success of this event, including our Vice President, Magdalene Assaman, and our Treasurer, Mackenzie Herzog. I would also like to thank the Harry Guess Memorial Lecture Planning Committee, Michelle Johnson-Funk, Alice White, Mary Beth Ritchie, and Cindy Gurman, who made time to meet with me and respond to many, many, many emails starting back in September to help coordinate the details for this special 10th anniversary event. I would also like to acknowledge Liz Gary, who did an incredible job organizing the NC-TRAC's CER symposium. I'm not sure if, oh, hi Liz. So I want to thank Liz Gary. The symposium focused this year on pediatric safety and patient-reported outcomes, which were two themes that were central to Dr. Guess's contributions to the field of pharmacoepidemiology. So thank you for collaborating with us so that we could hold these two events in parallel and showing me how events should be planned, because that was really great. And thank you to Dr. Hugh Tilson for delivering a touching commemorative address honoring Harry. And finally, many thanks to Dr. Till Sturmer for his assistance with our student chapter and with coordinating this year's lecture.